Hello, this is my multimedia presentation for English 1302. I did my essay on poor man's pudding and rich man's crumbs, so I'm just gonna start. My first slide is not rich man's, it's poor man's pudding, and I first want to talk about the idea poor man's items. Baudor in the first conversation talks about how the poor use rainwater as substitutes for items. Like he did use describes it as poor man's egg, poor man's manure, poor man's eye water, and then kind of created a picture of rainwater there to contrast on how rainwater is kind of disgusting in real life, and he's kind of out of touch. I included a picture of poor man's pudding, snow as acting like manure. Another theme in the poor man's pudding is the theme of America, poverty, the loneliness they feel. And I'll cover that later, but the last picture of the house in the middle is a contrast to how Dodor describes nature versus how nature really affects us. So next up is Rich Man's Crumbs. So what takes place in Rich Man's Crumbs is in Europe. On the first day, there's a huge feast with the kings, and the second day, the leftovers from that feast gets passed over to the peasants and handed out. That's why I included a picture of half-eaten food, peasants, and a huge feast. And then Europe, and the picture in the top middle is a picture of London's Mayor Charity Day, and I believe that Mobile Herman is trying to satirize this event. So next up, I want to talk about Herman. So I kind of believe that the narrator of the story is based off his own experiences. So Herman was a seaman for a lot of his young life, and he used that experience to write T.P. Omo, and Moby Dick. So I think just like I use his experience as a seaman to write those books, he uses his experience as a middle class writer to write Poor Man's Pudding and Rich Man's Crumbs. And I believe that Baudor was a example of a romantic that Herman met during his writing travels. Next up, I want to cover is false philanthropism. So in Europe, we see this idea of false philanthropism. Yes, the rich in Rich Man's Crumbs were giving out food, but they're described as half eaten. All the meat eaten out of them is just the shell of the food left. And I believe that they're trying to just make themselves look better in the eyes of the public, and trying to remove guilt from themselves. Next I want to cover is romanticism. Like I mentioned earlier, I believe Blendor in the Poor Man's Pudding is kind of a satirized version of, not even a satirized version, but based on a real life person that Herman met in Europe or in America. And brother before believes that nature is beautiful, nature is just, we should return to nature. And then I also included drawings, romantic drawings. But in real life, we have floods, there's tornadoes, there's fires. Contrast the Baldor's usage or conversation with how Martha, the wife of the Culture family, was standing on a half rotten soaked board and was feeling the penetrating damp of the bare ground. And then we can see how nature is not that just. I also included 2 photos of romantic writers that were famous at the time, William Wordsworth and William Blake. A fun fact, Herman's first two books, Tipi and Omo, were romantic writers and they glorified like the sea life, but I believe like he changed after Moby Dick and started to cover the realities of the world. Next up on cover is the American Dream. So the American Dream is the idea that you can become successful and rich in America just through hard work and effort, and then this installs a false pride into Americans and the idea that if you're not rich or successful and you're like reliant on someone else, then you're like useless to society, you're lazy, you're just like a leech onto society. So that's why the Coulter family, like even though they're obviously like struggling, they're not lazy, and they do hard work every single day, they're not successful, and they can't even like portray it properly. Like they have to like pretend that they're successful in order for them to feel like they fit into the American society, like they feel pressured to. Next I want to cover is like the writing style of Rich Man Crumbs or Poor Man's Pudding, which is like a diapic. So diapic is like a form of photography where you put two contrasting photos and then you can see I guess it's not contrasting, but two similar photos, but you can see the contrast in them and that forms the themes of them. So obviously the similarities between Poor Man's Pudding and Rich Man Crumbs is the theme of poverty, but I feel like through this we can also see the similarities, which is like the struggling each go to and like the processes where the rich ignore them. Like Europe uses false philanthropy and romanticism, while America uses American dream to ignore the pleas of the poor. A good quote I found from William 28 is that Poor Man's Pudding rejects the idea of comfortable poverty. Rich Man Crumbs dismisses the posture of enlightened wealth and kind of like nicely explains the contrast and ideas between the two. Next I want to talk about Leviel's Gambit, or like basically throughout the story we see the struggling through the eyes of the narrator, and at the end of the first at the end of the story he's even says the narrator says that he pleads like heaven save me equally from the poor man's pudding and the rich man's crumbs. And I think what Veal is trying to do here is that he's doing like a gamble that if you agree with him, that then you're agreeing with the sentiment that that like you're a middle class in the outside perspective and you don't want to be involved. You don't want to be in poverty, so you try to avoid it. And then if you avoid it, then you can't help the poor. And that's how like the middle class does not lend assistance to the poor. Next up, I just want to talk about how does it still apply today. So today, American society-wise, there's inflation and raises. Like Americans have to work like a minimum wage doesn't correspond to inflation anymore, and Americans have to work longer hours each day if they want to survive. Romantic or European-wise, I think I want to talk about how like there's still like a huge financial difference in some, although it's not in Europe anymore, more in the Middle East region, but there's a huge like a financial difference between the upper and lower class, where like the upper class all owns the natural resources in that country, and it leads to like horrible living conditions for the lower class. And then here's my works cited. You'll notice that there isn't that much works cited because most of the pictures I used were free use, and I only cited the pictures that I grabbed from a different source. So thank you for watching my video and have a nice day.